This is Viva Fry.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough.
This is Tom Luongo.
This is Chuck Prodnick.
This is Alex Kreiner.
Hey, this is Brad Wall.
This is JP Sears.
Hi, this is Frank Peretti.
This is Tammy Peterson.
This is Danielle Smith.
This is James Lindsay.
Hey, this is Brett Kissel, and you're listening to the Shaun Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Wednesday. How's everybody doing today? All right, let's get to a little precious metals, shall we? The current price of gold today is sitting at $58.25.96, and you all know what's coming next. A year ago, $36.71. I like Gold on Silver Gold Bull. They got the charts there. You can see the historical trend of gold, silver, and other things I might add in. And I'm always doing it with the Canadian dollar, so any American listener or seasoned investor that runs everything off U.S. dollars, I like seeing it in Canadian dollars. Forgive a Canadian for doing that. Okay. When it comes to things going on, Silver Gold Bull, Black Friday, Cyber Monday deals, they got a bunch of different things going on there. You can check that out at silvergoldbull.ca. And when it comes to any questions you have around buying, selling, storing, or using your retirement accounts to invest in precious metals, just head to Bow Valley Credit Union. I'm looking at the next one. Head to silvergoldbull.ca, or down in the show notes, Graham's contact info is there. You can text or email him, and he can answer any questions you have around that. Bow Valley Credit Union. Buying and selling Bitcoin has never been easier. Bow Valley Credit Union has developed the first in Canada Bitcoin gateway. With just a few clicks, you can buy Bitcoin directly to your Bow Valley Credit Union account. We've been hopping on all the sponsors' websites, so I hopped on Bow Valley Credit Union just to kind of check some things out. You know how insane it is to me that I had my entire account locked out for trying to buy, it was something like $50 of Bitcoin. And to have a bank that literally you go on there and they got precious metals and Bitcoin sitting right there. I think they're not going to lock you out of your account for bringing up those two conversations, yet a whole bunch of our established banking institutions in this country are completely opposite. So if you're sitting here in Alberta, because I know when I talked to Brett the last time when we were at the Prairie Rising Forum in Regina, he was talking about Saskatchewan folks are going to have to wait. But they're hoping, over the course of, a couple of years. I don't know, folks. Don't take this as the gospel. But right now it's only in Alberta is all I'm getting at. And if you're sitting in Alberta and you're wondering about Bitcoin or precious metals, I don't know if there's another bank in the province that you should be looking at than BVCU. That's just my eyes on it, because I've dealt with some things, been removed from some things, and then that's not even tacking on the Evichipiak story and others being locked out of their accounts. Bow Valley Credit Union, you can visit them at bowvalleycu.com. Silver Gold Bull. Precious metals, now I'm doing it, oh man. I did it on Silver Gold Bull. Now I'm doing it on Bow Valley Credit Union's ad. When it comes to precious metals or Bitcoin, BVCU is open to those conversations. Diamond 7 Meats here in Lloydminster is a family-run business with over 26 years of service, offering more than just retail cuts. They provide livestock processing for farmers and ranchers in Saskatchewan, Alberta, including custom sausage making for most domestic and wild game. I'm going to assume no cloned meat in an old Diamond 7. If you don't have your own animals and you're worried about cloned meat, they're different than the retail stores. Their retail sales will connect you with producers offering sides or quarters of beef, pork, and lamb. Their experienced staff can help you fill your freezer with exactly what you need, and you can find them on the north end of town, Highway 17 and 67th Street North. Better yet, give Diamond 7 a call today. 306-825-9718. Caleb Taves, Renegade Acres. They got the Community Spotlight, the Mashspiel coming January 17th. 10 teams available. You can sign up as an individual or teams of 4. It's just west of Leduc in Kalmar, Alberta. That's going to be a fun day. The Cornerstone Forum returns March 28th at the Weston Calgary Airport. Yes, heading back to Calgary. You can find out all the details down in the show notes. Just look for the showpass.com/Cornerstone26. If you're listening or watching on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, Substack. Yes, we've been throwing them all out on Substack. You can make sure to subscribe. Make sure to leave a review. If you're enjoying the show, folks, make sure to share with a friend. All right, let's get on to that tale of the tape. Today's guest is a journalist, filmmaker, author, and host of the Mel K Show. I'm talking about Mel K, so buckle up. Here we go. Welcome to the Shaun Newman podcast. Today, I'm joined by Mel K. Mel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here.
Now, I feel like a lot of people know you on this side, but in case they don't, I don't know, wherever you want to start, however long you want to go, give the audience a little bit of your background.
Oh, okay. Well, I started out in journalism way long ago in the 90s at NYU, and then went into film, and then I kind of combined both into a career. I moved to Hollywood when I was in my very early 20s, and I started working in historical dramatic reenactment type shows when they were new, way back when. And I found kind of a niche that I was basically creating fiction out of history, and it became something that I enjoyed doing. And over the years, I worked on many shows and some movies. And then I started really getting into what was going on in terms of the same names coming up in so many different time periods of history. No matter what happened and what changed in America or the world, there were certain families, certain names that were very obviously functioning above our nations without our consent, as far as I'm concerned. And that led me to kind of digging into corruption. First, I really got to understand the homeless industrial complex even before I started digging into the international financial system and everything else. It was very clear to me at this point, I had moved back to New York working on something there, that there was a need to keep these NGOs going because they were billion-dollar businesses that were based around, curing maybe even cancer, but also ending homelessness or poverty or anything else. And it was like these same NGOs that at the end of the day were funding almost everything. And that started me on that path. And I dug a lot into one of the scripts that my first and that I was most proud of was about Hannah Arendt. And she was a writer and a philosopher and all kinds of things. But she wrote the Eichmann in Jerusalem, The Banality of Evil, because she covered the Eichmann trial in Israel of the only Nazi that was tried in Israel. And she went there for the New Yorker. And they did not like a lot of what she had to say. And I became totally obsessed with her. I wrote a screenplay about her experience in covering that trial. And from that point on, that's what I was doing. And then COVID came, and a lot of the work that I did looking into the 30s and 40s in Germany, I suddenly saw obvious parallels to the game that was being played on the world during the pandemic. And then the whole world shut down, at least for me in New York, on March 15th of that year. And I started the Mel K show, I think that week. I had already been doing podcasts about Hollywood and other stuff, but then I really wanted to dig deep into what was happening to our country and the world, and how I believed that we were being controlled by basically invisible rulers above us. And I think we still are today. And that is the battle we are in right now. So that's the long and short story.
When you one of the things that's interesting to look when you look back through history is the parallels. And you mentioned a word that I see often. When you started looking back into history, what parallels did you start to see?
Well, I constantly saw three foundations all the way back to the 30s: the Rockefeller family foundations, the Ford Foundation, and the Carnegie Foundation. And of course, I had already dug into, in a different project, the Federal Reserve, and I believe the first and initial infiltration into America was through the banking system. I have come to believe that the United States may have been sold a bill of goods that we won the American Revolution, but I don't think the UK ever felt that we had won the American Revolution. I just think that they thought it wasn't worth physically fighting anymore. And I believe that the entire Federal Reserve was a step in the UK and the Crown taking back America as they belonged in court, according to them, belonged to them. And from that point on, I just think that the families that were involved in the Federal Reserve to this day still continue to function as if they are supranational. And many of the things that have been created, particularly by the Rockefeller family, whether it's the One Foot in England, One Foot in America, Chatham House, and Council of Foreign Relations, or it's the Club of Rome and Limits of Growth, where all the global warming, global climate stuff comes from, or UNESCO, the Education International. You can go on, and the Rockefellers pop up over and over and over, and then all roads, as I always think, lead to some kind of conglomerate that was set up in the waning days of World War II before Hitler surrendered Germany. I think that the world structure was put into place finally that they had tried with the League of Nations after World War I. And from that point on, I really do believe that they have been building slowly but surely the global governance model, of which Kissinger and Rockefeller and a lot of other people felt was better for the world. That I think Rockefeller himself said in his memoir that a moneyed class of bankers and and basically superior beings are better at running the world than people, or having a by the people for the people auto-determination republic like the United States. And so as far as I can see, we in the United States of America are just not free. And that's why no matter who has become president, particularly after the murder of JFK, nothing changes. And that is by design. It all goes, for me, back to multiple things, but largely the international banking cartel and the infrastructure and the immunities set up for that cartel, and the global public-private partnership of the tentacles of the UN and the NGOs that all somehow got immunity in 1945 that still is intact today, and I believe is their secret weapon on keeping this fraud on all of our countries going.
When you talk about immunity, could you explain that out for me?
Sure. So so a lot of people don't fully understand that the first thing that I look at that really strikes me is shortly before the end of World War II, when before Hitler surrendered, there was a meeting in France. It was called the Red House meeting. It's CIA documents that were released. And basically what they called themselves at the time, now we call them globalists, but they used to call themselves internationalists, led by Rockefeller and a bunch of those people. And then so they all kind of met with the bankers. And when I say the bankers, I mean the City of London, the Bank of International Settlements, the Reich Bank under Schreff. London at that point is run by Montague Norman. And then we have two Wall Street lawyers who were in Switzerland during this time, setting up this situation with the Bank of International Settlements, known as the Dulles brothers. Both bankers, lawyers for the banks on Wall Street, Sullivan and Cromwell. And to me, the idea that Dulles, particularly Alan Dulles, was in Bern, Switzerland during those months, and during that time towards the end of the war, working with McKittrick, who was an American also banker lawyer at the Bank of International Settlements, that they were setting up an international world structure that basically was what I call the international banking cartel. And what people don't know is that they gave themselves immunity in the International Organization Immunity Act of 1945, written around that same time. They gave the Bank of International Settlements and all 62 banks that fall under them immunity from any kind of audit, any kind of legal action, all of the families of all of these groups, banks at that point, and then you can also put in the IMF, the World Bank, everything that came out of Bretton Woods, all to this day have this immunity from this 1945 immunity plan. But at the same time, they were creating the United Nations in tandem with the international banking cartel, and they too gave themselves immunity. And that was the UN, and 76 international organizations under the UN also have immunity to this day. And that immunity does not allow anyone to investigate them, to bring legal action against them, to look at their books, to audit them. And frankly, it doesn't matter where they are in the world. They exercise this immunity. I lived in New York for a lot of my life. Everyone there knows that the United Nations and the embassies there and everything kind of have their own jurisdiction. And so does the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland. So does the Vatican. We all know the City of London, which is not London. It's the Bank of the Monarch, of the Crown. They have their own kind of vassal state there, and obviously DC has its own thing going on. So what all these years that people have been questioning what is going on with these, because they rule by conference, so they'll go to Davos, Bilderberg, COP conference, and any number of conferences in between. And it's usually the same people. I've been following at least Davos for the last 7 years. And, it's the same kind of end game, which is the people, humanity is the problem as per limits of growth, and that there is a billionaire kind of international class that believes that they not only treat the whole planet like they are the parent company of planet Earth, but they firmly believe that they are the ones that should make decisions for 8 billion people. And the way it looks now is there's about 6,000 people in this group that I say have no allegiance or alliance to any country or any flag or any religion or race or nation or people. They are power for power's sake, and it has been going on for well over, I believe, 100 years. And right now we are at a situation where I think after the pandemic, they made a lot of mistakes, and the spotlight was finally put on them, and now they're trying to rebrand, reorganize, keep going. But slowly but surely, we are watching the wheels fall off at the failed, finally, COP conference, a scam from the beginning. And of course, the G20, with America not showing up, doesn't have much teeth either. So I do see the struggle right now is between maintaining national sovereignty for nation states and global governance, of which Agenda 21 was the first try. Obviously, League of Nations after World War I was the actual first one. But then when the United Nations came in, it appears to me that they had already decided that nation states, presidents, constitutions, borders were just a problem for them. And the birth of the multinational corporation, and then them all getting together and all being members of the World Economic Forum, such as stakeholders. And then they were obviously aligned with where the money goes for all that stuff, the World Bank, the IMF, then, of course, the World Trade Organization, and above them all, the Bank of International Settlements, which is still completely opaque to this day. So the way I see where we are now is enough people have to wake up and decide what they want for their family and their country and their future and this world. And now we have, I think, two factions fighting amongst the parent company, which are like the tech bros that believe in technocracy and everything is easily made efficient through technology. Of course, totalitarianism is a part of that. And then the other side that I don't think it has much love for humanity. Frankly, I think they are the war for profit folks, and they've been at it for a very long time. And I believe that that group is fighting amongst itself at the same time that nations are waking up, particularly the EU, to that they have been captured by an unelected financial class that really is more concerned with controlling international banking and monetary situations through war and other things than they are in the people that have been swallowed up in the EU. So that's where I think we are now in that sense.
That was a lot. And so I'm like, I've written down 18 notes. And I guess I'm going to start with this. Two factions. You got the tech bros, the war for profit. In your mind, is there any other factions out there that are vying for the power or the control or the influence, whatever word you want to tack onto it, that are in that realm right? The tech bros, you got the war for profit, the banking side of that.
Yeah.
Is there another faction out there that is in that realm?
Well, I would say that there are people that are 1 foot in each, like the people that go to Bilderberg. Obviously, Bilderberg started around the same time, post World War I, of the Bank of International Settlements. I believe that they are connected to some extent, and of course, we know that Thiel and Schmidt and a lot of the tech guys, mainly out of Silicon Valley, but really funded by In-Q-Tel and DARPA and the CIA and the rest of it. I think a lot of those guys have dual alliances, because the biggest problem to me is not fully understanding how the entire world has allowed BlackRock and Vanguard to have the kind of power that they have. And I believe that they must be a part of this structure somehow, that they have basically they own everything. And so all the corporate decisions, they're all one. They're all the same. And particularly in America, I mean, BlackRock runs basically all of the states' public pension funds to the tune of trillions of dollars, while at the same time we know that Larry Fink, who was elevated, not surprisingly, the same day Donald Trump was finally allowed to meet with Putin and talk diplomacy for the first time, basically publicly since 2016, that Larry Fink was elevated that day to the top of the World Economic Forum. And what I see is that the United States is paying for the global governance model and the Agenda 2030, which to me is 17 development goals to keep this 100-year-long immune group of internationalists in power for another 100 years. So when I look at this big picture, the other faction, if you look at that, I think are being used. I frankly think the red-green axis that we're watching right now, which is obviously the Muslim Brotherhood and political Islam, and the communist Marxist Bolsheviks of the other side, they're working together to destroy the West from within, but they can't coexist with their ideologies. Both ideologies are totalitarian, and one says you have to believe in Allah or you're a slave, or you should not be alive. The other one says there's no God, only the government, like Mao. And frankly, those two things can't align, but they are aligning in terms of being funded by the globalists, I believe, to destroy the Western nations from within and kind of shift everything to the already built technate known as China. In the meantime, I think that there's also it's just my belief that Donald Trump and some of these leaders that look like their adversaries all totally understand the model of the international banking cartel, the global public-private partnership, and the threat that brings to sovereign nation states. Because we can say what we want about China or Russia or India, but these are nation states that are not willing, in my opinion, from what I can see, to give up the status of being a nation state, where in Agenda 2030, it is very clear that nation states should no longer exist and that they would really rule regionally. And that's why I think they're capturing a lot of mayors and governors around the world in the West, because that is the model, is to run the world through regions and hubs, kind of like the Hunger Games, through technology and technocracy and a totalitarian kind of control system. And the scary part to me, and this is what I keep saying about America being a constitutional republic with a very important constitution that is about individual liberty, autodetermination, inalienable rights. This is not compatible with what they are pushing us into. And, Barack Obama, of course, I think that he's a Manchurian candidate and was born into it, but he signed the United States onto Agenda 2030 in 2015 without the consent of the governed, without the people even knowing what it was about. And from that point on, I believe trillions and trillions of dollars have been invested in this global public infrastructure that would essentially, in cyberspace, make this model, this technocracy, totalitarian Agenda 2030 work. Only we would then have the illusion of having sovereign borders, but nobody's talking about the sovereignty in cyberspace. And that's what's bothering me the most. It makes me feel like, that this group of people that want everyone to be tracked, traced, and surveilled from birth to death, including all natural resources and animals and everything else, are working together, but yet might not have the same end goal. I don't see them as inherently both evil, but I do believe that the group that falls under the Klaus Schwab Great Reset, Build Back Better, those people, I believe, will do whatever it takes to maintain power, including starting World War III, another pandemic, or any of that. Where the other side, I think, just thinks slowly but surely they'll creep in the digital surveillance state in every aspect of our lives, and we will welcome it because of, because it's convenient. So, I mean, both of them are, to me, the real problem, and humans that don't realize that they are not free and can and should be, if they would stop fighting each other by design, could actually stop it, at least in the United States.
I want to stick on factions just for a second. Curious, once again, I'm going to go back through it. Tech Bros, War for Profit, but then you listed off, and I'm just going to use the countries, forgive me, United States, Russia, I think India, and maybe China, as they want to keep their nation state intact, and they don't want to go along with this weird borderless society where you rule by area and everything else. To me, isn't that another faction, or do they fall under one of the other factions?
I think they fall under the the new thing that the international lawfare crew talk about is authoritarian versus democracy, where neither of those are what we're dealing with. But when it comes to those two factions, what I believe is that there's national pride in China and in Russia, and I believe in India, and I believe in the United States, though it's been very hollowed out, obviously, since the Manchurian Candidate.
It's been hollowed out, but from a Canadian's point of view, you got a heck of a lot of national pride there.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do, but we've been under attack. I believe we've been under a color revolution model since Donald Trump surprisingly won and threw the entire deep state into panic. And, the biggest thing we have to know in America is that the murder of JFK, after that, it appears to me that the United States intelligence agencies, and this goes also to what I'm talking about what was created by the Dulles brothers after World War II. They have continued, in my estimation. I do not believe that the CIA, and first of all, I think the CIA, MI6, and Mossad are probably all interacting with each other. I don't think that they're different intelligence agencies. I frankly think that this was all created in Switzerland before the end of World War II. A lot of this, in order to have a global intelligence brand that also, I believe, the other Dulles brother changed the State Department as well in the United States into a faction of the international banking cartel, global public-private partnership. And what has really been going on, from what I see, is that the CIA has been working to protect by any means necessary that international banking system and global public-private partnership with NGOs and everything, USAID funding a lot of it, National Endowment for Democracy on the ground to overthrow nations that don't want it. But it seems like the struggle that has been going on since World War II is between maintaining national sovereignty and giving up national sovereignty for global governance. And we are at the end game of that right now, I believe.
You go to this invisible group that are trying to control the world, trying to get rid of nation states and trying to find a way to basically enslave humanity.
Yeah.
To me, as you talk, I'm like, it just feels like the game has been rigged for a while, and that in their tool belt, they have some very interesting tools. And you've rattled off probably 50 different ways they can literally, oh, that's not working. we're going to push on this button. Oh, that's not working. We're going to push on this button. And, so many of us, I think, go to like kinetic war, right? Like bullets flying. That's how they're going to do it. And yet, what I'm learning, and I learned through COVID, and I don't know about yourself. It's like this slow creep. You turn the dial just a little bit. Oh, no, that's kind of weird. But then it kind of becomes normal. And if you have, immunity since 1945 on like a crazy amount of organizations that have influence across the planet, and then you have this slow creep of how they can just twist a dial here and twist it out. Oh, we'll meet next year. How's that going over there? Kind of giving us some flack over here. Why don't we introduce this? Like when you look at I think you rattled off 6,000 people roughly that you put into this group. And when you think of 9 billion people, folks, that's a pretty small part of the humanity that's looking at it.
Yeah.
How does humanity, team good, I don't know what you want to call it. I mean, obviously you gotta waken up. Okay, fine, I'm awake. Now what's your, Mel, one of the things that I admire about you is you are information by fire hose, but I see you attack the world and the problems of it the same way. It's not like you just spot off some things and then, I don't know, go do something else. It's like you're doing a show 7 days a week. You've written a book. You're writing a second one, I believe, coming out here. Like you're contagious energy. And I'm like, so you've been staring at this problem.
Yeah.
Is there a solution where you're like, this is what we got to do?
Yeah. I mean, I believe that there is. First of all, you got to end the International Immunities Act of 1945, first and foremost, and start to dig into those institutions, because we saw what Doge can do. Unfortunately, we have a cesspool known as Washington, D.C., that has been gorging off of the U.S. taxpayers for decades. It's my belief, frankly, that the U.S. taxpayer not only paid for the entire Cold War and the entire war on terror, which had no defined enemy and eventually was turned on the people of this country, but I think the United States taxpayer, through USAID and other grants and stuff, have paid for the entire global warming operation as well. So when I look at that, I think, so at the same time, with the help of Hollywood and media and everything else, they've convinced us all that the other guy is the problem. It's always somebody else, whether it's black or white or Jewish, Christian, or, whatever, what gay, straight, all this nonsense, this endless oppression Olympics going on in America. And then, of course, the same NGOs that have always subverted the will of the people, particularly Rockefeller, Carnegie, Ford, and then all the tentacles of those, continue to fund this internal struggle against your neighbors, so that you never really see that it's not your neighbors. And we've all been equally deceived to keep this international financial world order, which that's really what it is, going. And, when H.W. Bush walked on the floor of the United Nations and announced that we would have new world order, he left out financial. And it was a really important part of it. So there's multiple things. First, I wrote this book called Americans Anonymous from my experience 20 years in recovery. It's called Restoring Power to the People, One Citizen at a Time. I can only say for America, but I believe this is probably true for Canada, Australia, and the EU. Everything is local. This idea that we have a parliament or a government that is in any way, shape, or form not some sort of money laundering criminal cartel at this point is just deceiving ourselves. The passing of the unconstitutional Patriot Act should be the most egregious thing, looking back, that has ever happened to the American citizens by our own government after, I would say, the Federal Reserve in 1913. And that was actually written under the Clintons, and it didn't pass twice. It was once in Hillary care, and then it was put into a Clinton omnibus and didn't go. And then, of course, 9/11 happens, and they push it through. But if you trace that, you're going to go to the Project for New American Century, and they're like full spectrum dominance militarily of the United States, which, of course, a lot of these guys are dying, which makes me sad because I want them to be exposed while alive. But Rumsfeld, Cheney, Wolfowitz, all these guys that wrote the Project for a New American Century, in the first page, it says they would need something to get the American people to go along with it. They would need something like a Pearl Harbor, and boom, a year later, we have 9/11, and then we have the Patriot Act, and America essentially becomes a police state run by the intelligence community. And what I see all of that is that the American people have been so dumbed down, have been so turned into such a consumer, narcissistic, just very unhealthy society on purpose, that the idea of blaming everyone else for your problems, or watching the explosion of what's become of the basically welfare state in America and all of this stuff, none of this was anything of what this country was supposed to be. And now I'm at a place where I believe that it's local action is the only way, and I mean this for all nations, but local action, particularly in your nation and my nation, people getting together that are like-minded, that fully understand there is no left and right, there is no Republican, Democrat. There, at this point, it is so many decades of criminality being hidden from us under the guise of national security that only we, the people, and the sphere of influence we have around us, by getting involved in local government, by having local oversight, by having state groups, by having smaller factions, that is what I believe to be the only way that America can fight back against what is creeping totalitarianism through technocracy that we are all walking eyes wide open into right now. It is very clear to me that the NGOs and the World Economic Forum, Young Global Leaders and Global Changers, and the United Nations Sustainable Development, that it has infiltrated every aspect of the United States of America, from our schools to our municipalities to our police to our every level has been infiltrated by outside forces that don't believe in liberty, don't believe in individual sovereignty, don't believe in a government that doesn't, dictate behavior or whatever it's turned into, that everyone has the opportunity to succeed, but that is up to them and they're responsible for that. So my belief is that it would have to be a citizen awakening and a coming together of people to realize that we have all been lied to and looted, and have sent our ancestors and our brothers and sisters and parents and everyone off to wars that were really not what we were told, that they were really wars for profit to create this extraordinary level of wealth and power that sits above all of our nations and decides things without even considering if the people of the country want it. And I really think people realizing that all of us have been equally betrayed. There's not one group that has been left out, and that they are all multiple psychological operations to nudge people to continuously be at odds with some other side or other thing. And so either you're at a point where you're apathetic and you're just going along with life, or life's so busy, or you're in the debt slavery model and you're just trying to survive, or you are a operative for the globalists trying to destroy America from within, or you're a patriot that loves the United States and, with all its flaws, wants it to live past 250 years. And in that sense, you are still a founder of this nation. And it's your responsibility as an individual to do everything you can to get this nation back to being a sovereign country where foreign influence, foreign money, and global governance is not relevant, at least not in your neck of the woods. So I believe that a nationwide movement of individuals standing up and uniting together, which I believe is happening, is the only way to maintain national sovereignty, at least for America, but I think for most of the West.
Yeah, when you talk about getting together in your communities and different things like that, one of the things that COVID did here, and I'm sure all across every country that was affected, was it forced those people together. but it just, because they would search at each other out. And here in
Yeah.
Alberta and Saskatchewan,
Yeah.
I know of probably hundreds of communities that all had little groups that were getting together going, what is going on?
Right.
And started meeting and started disobeying the government's orders of you could only get to, what was it, folks? 15 people? Was it even 15 people could get together? And,
Right.
every year Eastern European that I ran into, escaped communism,
I
was
know it.
like, you got to start meeting. They start telling you can't meet. That
Right.
is the beginning of the end, right? And so people started meeting. But that is COVID is not forgot about on this show, but
Mm.
certainly life moves on, and it's been interesting to watch as they kind of just eased off the pressure. Everything kind of settles back down. And then, sitting on this side, as I'm sure on your side, you're sitting there watching what they're doing. You're like, what are everybody doing here? I mean, keep your eye on the ball because the ball is still moving.
Big time, big time. They're not slowing down at all. They're still having their conferences. They're still building their infrastructure. It's already built, frankly. And that is the truth. And we haven't seen justice or accountability on any front since the murder of JFK, not just in America, but in the entire West, if you really think about it. We've had scapegoats and we've had things like that. But the people that are in power, at least in America, it seems to me that the people that murdered and covered up the murder of JFK went on to get promoted. And then the people that covered up the next thing, criminality by our government, got promoted and promoted and promoted. And the swamp, particularly the CIA and FBI, is so deep full of people that are way more loyal to maintaining the institution and the power of this out of control intelligence community in America than they are at all concerned with the people of this country or the safety of the people of this country. And it's gone rogue all on its own. And then COVID really, I think, kicked it to the next level in terms of how much the Patriot Act destroyed privacy, freedom. Millions of people in America were spied on, censored, silenced, shut down in Canada as well, by our own government. And that still has not been dealt with. We had this Jim Jordan do some kind of Mickey Mouse kabuki weaponization committee for 2 years where people are going out there and showing, Twitter was working with and got money from the administration to silence and shut down people whose information might have saved lives. And we know that now, and they're still not held accountable. But then you look and you see, well, Google is a partner of the Global Public-Private Partnership, is a partner of the World Economic Forum, is a partner of the Global Public Infrastructure, which I still have not heard anything about sovereign nations when it comes to the built already global public infrastructure. So a lot of this stuff is really, I think, very clear to see. And what scares me the most is that they do telegraph what they're doing. So, of course, somebody like me last week sees what happened with Cloudflare and when everything went down, because the EU, along with Canada and Australia, they're really, really tripling down on censorship, silencing, punishing speech. They want to fight misinformation, disinformation, all that, which they're the cause of. They want to fight anyone going against climate change or against Agenda 2030 or against any of this. And all that's saying to me is that they're nervous, they're losing. And what scares me is they had this thing, the cyber polygon exercise, which was very similar to Event 201, which most people that are honest believe was kind of a dress rehearsal for COVID, run by the Gates Foundation, the World Economic Forum, Johns Hopkins, and a bunch of media. Well, they also did the same thing with what Klaus Schwab called a pandemic-like virus of the internet. So, I keep seeing that they're not giving up on controlling the narrative, however, by any means necessary, by illegal open border immigration, by any means necessary to collapse inside in the Cloward Piven strategy of bringing in so many people that need to crash your social safety net, which is already out of control in America. And a lot of what they're doing makes them incredibly dangerous. And frankly, I don't think that NATO, because you brought up earlier, just a side note, about kinetic war, and you know, it's really bothering me because I saw the budget or lack thereof. There's not been a audit that has worked in 10 years of the Pentagon, but you look at the budget and it keeps getting higher. I mean, it's getting towards $1 trillion, and all you think in your head is, but that's not, we're not building. I mean, that's not what does it anymore. It's not the tanks and the fire and, you know, all of the planes and everything that they make. Because I think the most dangerous thing, and this is in a NATO document from 2020, is the cognitive warfare of military might that is really destroying minds and lives and countries and futures. And frankly, it was in my work. It looks like it started before MK Ultra, obviously in Nazi Germany, but certainly before that. But it really went on steroids under Alan Dulles, MK Ultra, the Satanists that ran the United States Army Psychological Behavior Bureau, Colonel Aquino, and Mind Wars. And by 2020, NATO was running that. And NATO's history with Nazi Germany and Nazis, and you know, a lot of what history is erased between post-World War II, including Operation Paperclip, including the rat lines of all the money that came into America from many industries and companies that had one foot in Nazi Germany and then one foot in Europe and one foot in America. A lot of that was set up before the end of World War II. And I believe that they've worked together to basically perfect mind control on a massive scale. And to, as the cognitive warfare NATO document says, the weapons of our current time are brains. The battle for the brain is a big, I watched a webinar by NATO in Canada, and they had this battle of the brain. And what they were talking about was destroying countries without firing a shot by using different mind control frequencies, all kinds of things. And they have gotten to the point in technology where they can do it to one person, they can do it to a group of people, rioters, or they can do it to an entire nation. And I believe that they have the tools and technology to do just that. And I think they rolled out a lot of it during COVID to test it. And that's where I think we are, is it's the brain, it's your brain that is the weapon of choice of these current, you know, parent company that's running the world.
Oh, on the brain or on the psychological warfare, you know, one of the things that raised my eyebrows, I guess, was, you know, normally when you have you're fighting a war, you know, my brain always goes, okay, you're going to use whatever you can to basically defeat the enemy. And a lot of these military operations on psychology or on psyops are used to be what they did to, they'd walk into whatever poor country it was and then use it to divide the population and on and on. They've taken the lessons learned there, and more I'm hearing and seeing in Canada and elsewhere, it's being used on its own people now, which is should raise everybody's eyebrows. To say, what? Yep. What did you just say? And yet, you know, I just had a guy on from the UK. It's there. It's here in Canada. I'm sure it's on every Five Eyes country that is there. They're channeling or changing their direction away from other countries in the world back on their own population, and that should raise eyebrows. And the oversight on it is like zero. Like there's none. And it pops out, comes in a little article, and then all of a sudden it disappears again. You're like, how is this not? Well, I understand why it's not, but it surprises me that it hasn't grabbed more attention of more people.
Yeah. Well, that's what the whole operation of silencing, censoring, taking down. I mean, I and a lot of other people were unceremoniously just cut off from YouTube for suggesting early treatment on COVID, or questioning the very bizarre 2020 election in America, or any number of things you could say, and you were being silenced and shut down. It's a psychological operation, and it goes back to Yuri Bezmenov in his great interview with G. Edward Griffin in the 80s when he said America was already infiltrated. And what we're finding out now is that, no, it wasn't just the Operation Paperclip, which should disgust every American, but frankly, there were about 12 to 15,000 Nazis. And the other thing is the throwing around of terminology skips the ideology. So you say Nazi, right? And people think of, like, somebody in a uniform walking, in Hitler's Germany or something. No, it's an ideology of socialism and state control and all of this, and totalitarianism, that is the problem. And we've allowed also in America at least, our Constitution to be weaponized against us, to allow all of these things that are obviously unconstitutional, particularly when it comes to the Fourth Amendment of search and seizure and probable cause and warrants. Well, they got rid of all of that. And the American people were just like, yay, the Patriot Act. Well, that's not true. Right now, every single American citizen, I'm told that during the 4 years of the Autopen president, over 3 million Americans, including myself, were not just put on a list as domestic terrorists, but spied on. That 10,000 people within the intelligence community were literally spying on their fellow American citizens who did not agree with their Democrat ideology, which isn't even Democrat. It's really all funded by the same billionaire globalists. But you really do look at this and you think, oh my God, it's been mind control. And the reason, when I saw it, like, really, it was undeniable, was I was in Manhattan during the lockdowns, which was extraordinarily ridiculous and over the top. It was one of the only places in America that made the vaccine passport mandatory to go in anywhere. And at the same time, they kept the schools locked down almost 2 years in New York and all this stuff. And then suddenly, something I believe was planned in the 90s, which was what happened in Ukraine. Suddenly, we get this whole story that out of nowhere, Russia invades Ukraine. And suddenly my whole country, it seemed like every single person that was brainwashed to not use critical thinking at all during COVID switched immediately and hated Russia and hated everyone in Russia, didn't want any Russian athletes, didn't want any Russian vodka, didn't want any Russian, ballerinas. I mean, and it was everywhere. And suddenly everyone's like, yay, Ukraine. And you're thinking, you don't even know anything of what you speak. And it's been one after another. So I think that they really, really did capture, you can go back to Nazi Germany. They really did capture a good percentage, I'd say 20-30% of American citizens. A lot of and all of Hollywood was captured long ago. But I think that they captured them, and that those people are at this point, I would say, like, mentally ill. Like they're unable to have a conversation. Their hatred and toxic venom, just hearing the name Donald Trump is so irrational and insane. And I see these groups, and a lot of this is out of that Colonel Aquino's Mind Wars from the 60s that was released, declassified by the CIA later. But this NATO document from 2020 is basically, they had two different documents. One was using the social media for mind control and manipulation and video games. And the other one was about using actual people, rioting, shooters, all of this stuff. This is all very high level cognitive fifth generation warfare that is going unchecked completely, particularly in a country that is supposed to have, where the law and surveillance is supposed to protect the people, not protect the government from the people. And now that is exactly what it is. And as we see in America, Jim Jordan or all the people that were going to question the election, we found out were being spied on. Sitting senators, sitting Congress people. But again, nothing happens. 2 years, Jim Jordan and his friends are exposing the total and complete surveillance and, just what happened to people after January 6th, having their doors kicked in and being drug out, their lives destroyed, 1,600 people, all the judges that were lying to the country, the media, the worst, which I believe is fully controlled by the intelligence communities. And it's amazing to me. I think probably 30% of the American people are completely and totally mind controlled. And that's the hardest thing to deal with. Is they don't understand your enemies aren't your neighbors that voted for Trump. Your enemies are the people that keep you angry and toxic and full of venomous hate every single night on MSNBC on purpose, to make you unstable and unable to function normally under certain circumstances. And to me, that is the biggest problem right now, is that people aren't getting the idea that their brain is in danger, and they have to protect their brain and understand what propaganda and MK Ultra and mind control looks like. That's the only way to fight it, is to know it's happening and reject it mindfully. But a lot of people, it seems, are really, even in your country too. I have friends that are Canadian, and they don't even know anything's wrong in your country. And I can't even believe what's happened to Canada, particularly that they plopped in Carney, who's a Bank of England, like notorious international banking cartel member that has nothing to do with Canada. But this is what people are accepting, because the media is a psychological operation at this point to divide and conquer in all of the West.
Probably the best name I've heard for Mark Carney is Mark's Carnage. I thought that was pretty good.
I mean, I don't even understand at this point how people don't see it.
I mean, in fairness, when Biden won, there was a whole bunch of Canadians going, "What is going on?" Right?
Oh, I know.
We're returning the favor, Mel. That's what we're doing. We're giving you one of those moments where you're like, "What is happening in Canada?"
Yeah.
Before I let you out of here, there's one is Operation Paperclip. You brought it up, and one of the things that was kind of maybe an aha moment for me was I was reading Annie Jacobson's book on it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sitting there and I'm reading it, and I'm like, when the American people finally say no more, we've had enough of it. This was a terrible idea. They don't go, oh yeah, and deport everybody back and put them on trial, whatever. They ship them to other parts of the world outside the United States jurisdiction. And when you're reading that, you're like, oh, when they get busted, they find a way around the game again, so that they can continue to work. So that's one of the things that Operation Paperclip is sickening. It's not that they go, oh, you're right, this was a terrible choice, we shouldn't have done this. They go, okay, let's move them over here. Now they're not outside. Oh, we got rid of them all. They're no longer here in the United States. Meanwhile, they're still working with them, right? So when you talk about all the intelligence agencies working together and being this giant global intelligence, I think Operation Paperclip gives you a glimpse into how that works. The other thing I was curious, you talking about being in New York. Mamdani was just elected. Your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are that he was groomed, I believe, by Obama and Obama's circle, whom I all believe are spawn of something that happened here in the 60s known as the Weather Underground, a revolutionary group that inspired many with tentacles at the Chicago is the base for all of this Marxist communist undermining, subverting the nation. And
I gotta stop you. The Weather Underground, that's one I've never heard.
Yeah, they're the original 1960s. They were bombing all over. Bill Ayers, Bernardine Dorn, they groomed Obama in Chicago, and they also infiltrated all of the universities, particularly the schools of education and journalism. And they were basically a revolutionary group that at some point teamed up with the Black Panthers and were bombing. They bombed New York City. They were revolutionaries. They wanted to take down capitalism, kind of the same exact talking points as the Democrat Socialist of America now use now. Again, the Democrat Socialists of America are not Democrats, just like they are the exact same ideology, as far as I can see, of the National Socialist Workers' Party of Germany, which were the Nazis. They have the same mentality on their own website. It's totally government runs everything, government over, it's Mao's China. And these Democrat Socialists of America are funded by globalists. So Mamdani is one of them, as is Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, AOC, Ileana Presley. They're growing. They have about 250 people running. They are global revolutionaries. They do not believe in the United States, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, our borders. They don't believe in law and order. They don't believe in private property. They basically believe that the state should provide everything for the people, and don't really seem to go beyond that. And most of them are under 30, which shouldn't surprise anyone, since our education system, at least in America, was subverted long ago, but really went on steroids in the 90s with Common Core and a lot of other stuff that changed our education system. And really, the schools of education at the universities that lead teachers into activism rather than into education by design. And what's happened to our universities is they have become, particularly the higher level Ivy League universities, they have become, frankly, hedge funds with schools attached that train underqualified for their past level of merit that it took to get into those schools. They have turned into a pipeline into NGOs. And the jobs that these people can get when they get out of Harvard with their, PhD in lesbian literature in Africa in the 1600s, what's their next step? It's NGOs. So I believe that they created this, and this goes back to the Weather Underground. Many of them ended up being professors in Columbia, also at University of Chicago, Northwestern, Yale, many other schools, and they took this revolutionary philosophy and inserted it into these universities, and we see what's happened now. They're pumping out worthless degrees, with many of the people that go to these schools being foreign, and they are spreading. So Democrat Socialists of America is how Mamdani won. It is a network. It is well-funded, and it is all about collapsing the United States from within. And like I said, the whole goal of global governance and Agenda 2030 is to capture the cities, the mayors. They don't care anymore about DC, I don't think. I don't even know how much they care about the governor.
Well, no, but I wish you could see my sheet right now and how much scribbling I've been doing. I am building out a picture here. It was Klaus Schwab, the famous video of him talking about penetrating the governments, and we're in everywhere. We've got, and in my brain at that time, I'm like, wow, that's really clever. I wonder what meeting they sat down and thought that. But maybe you just clarified something for me with the Weather Underground. You were saying back then in the 60s, the Weather Underground was starting to penetrate universities. And once again, was that the first order of business? I don't know. But if you tie that back into these conferences where they all go and meet, right? And they sit down and they go, what's working for you? Well, we started penetrating the universities. That's been really interesting. So when you say they're not worried about DC anymore, no, it's not that they're not worried. They're already there.
They don't care. Right.
They're finding all the different places that are causing problems. And to me, if I don't know if I'm oversimplifying, but they're like, oh, we have to figure out this problem. And then it's this problem. And then they meet and they come back and they go, what's giving you issues? Maybe it's the mayors of the cities. Maybe it's the universities at one point. Maybe it's the corporations. Okay, well, let's take care of that. We thought we'd get it all with the banking. No, there's some problems there. They come back, they go out, and a year later they come back, and they just keep going back and forth, and they keep penetrating all the areas to where they're controlling all parts of society. And what you're pointing to is now mayors or the local community, as close as they can get to it, to try and control what happens there, because that is where community is actually formed. And what gives resistance to all this jazz is the local community, is the family.
Exactly.
And if they can
1000%.
destroy that and control it, then they can continue to enact this crazy, like, we're going to control every human being under the sun,
Yeah.
which is just an insane idea.
Yeah. Well, there's two things that I would tell you and other people to look into. One is how the World Economic Forum came to be. When I look at the global stage, I look at the City of London, Switzerland, Geneva, the fraud that they were neutral, which that's not true. They continued running the money for the world during World War II. They were not neutral. They were financially the catalyst for the future, and to make sure that the Third Reich money did not go anywhere but to the people that created that. But there was really, Klaus Schwab was recruited by one of the arch villains of this whole story, Henry Kissinger. He was running a program at Harvard University, Henry Kissinger, with money from the CIA to create the World Economic Forum, which came from another EU group with coal and steel. But it was really to have a foothold in Europe towards the unification of Europe, which of course was the Third Reich's goal: destroy Russia, unify Europe, and have it all run basically by Brussels and Geneva. And the Bank of England, and I at that point, I would say Wall Street. But there's that whole origin story of the World Economic Forum that leads back to Kissinger, and then that would lead back to the global governance model that would prefer no nation states and instead hubs or mayors. And also Rahm Emanuel, who was Obama's right hand and a real Chicago guy, when he was somehow mayor of Chicago, wrote a book about how in the future mayors will rule the world. And this goes back to Kissinger's original documents from the 70s, especially when he was enamored with China and built China, basically. The same tech bros built everything in China that we're all scared of here, with all the surveillance. And the other meeting that I think really shines a light on this, a lot of people don't know about, was in 2009. It was called the Good Club, and it was in New York City at the Rockefeller University, run by the Rockefeller Institute. And it was Bill Gates and Ted Turner, Soros, Oprah was there for some reason, Bloomberg, Warren Buffett, all these billionaires basically met with and David Rockefeller and the Rockefeller family was there. I think David might have been not there. He might have died by that point, but there was other Rockefeller family members there. And they all met to discuss two things: overpopulation and pandemics. And this was in 2009. And then in 2010, Rockefeller Institute puts out a document. And if you read that document, it is essentially what we've been living through. And under the guise of eugenics or depopulation, which is a total fraud, that is really, I believe, about natural resources and controlling them. And then the other whole thing was about preventing global pandemics. And you look at some of these offshoot meetings or these offshoot recruitment things that are happening at Harvard or Columbia University as a hotbed, or Yale or somewhere, NYU. And then you see, so they do have people everywhere that are organizing this global kind of governance takeover, but you don't really realize that because they're not externally doing that. Then you see that, they had this meeting and they all talked about the two things that came to define the last 15 years ago. Or you can go all the way back to George Soros writing the NATO World Order document before the USSR fell, and infiltrating Ukraine in the 90s with his NGOs and Open Society. And next thing you know, they're teamed up and they decide to break the agreement between Reagan and Gorbachev and expand NATO under Clinton. And you look at George Soros's NATO World Order document from 1993 or Brzezinski's 1995 similar document, and that is exactly what happened in Europe. So to me, I think what we're dealing with now was a long game post World War II plan to consolidate power. And I believe a third world war was part of it. And I think when Trump won in 2016, he got in the way of the plans that they had in place in Ukraine to eventually be the hub to take down finally Russia, unite Europe as Brzezinski wanted, who came back after he was Secretary of State, I believe, for Carter. But then Obama brought him back in. And I think that we were off to the races for World War III. And right now we're on the precipice of that. And a big part of Russiagate and what happened to Trump was not allowing Trump to do any diplomacy with Russia or Ukraine during those 4 years where I believe that the globalists ran.
I just interviewed two Swedish journalists, I'll call them, and they were talking about Olof Palme, and I'd never heard of him before. 1986, he gets assassinated. He's the prime minister of Sweden. And what did he get assassinated for? Speaking out against not talking to the Soviets and trying to de-escalate the Cold War, essentially, right? And they slandered him with being a sympathizer and all. Right. You take anything they said about Trump during that time and just put it on Palme, and you go, this isn't new. We're they don't want people to talk. They don't want people to de-escalate. They want this world that lives in constant fear. Right. One final thought before I let you out of here, because you brought up Oprah and you said, why? I don't know why she was there. And I go, well, I know she wasn't at the height in 2009, but if you were going to bring in somebody from media who had been, everybody knew her, Oprah is it. Her height, I think it said back in 1994 to 1998, what was her height? 20 million viewers.
Yeah.
An episode.
Yeah, and don't forget who gave out Bill Gates's computers to every student in America, Oprah. Don't forget who brought us.
That's what I mean, though.
Barack Obama.
So when you say why is Oprah sitting there, I'm like, because she was a titan of that realm, and they needed that realm to come in and talk about it. Is my guess.
And a Chicago kid, all roads for communism, Bolsheviks, all that in America, all roads lead to Chicago. And so that's another reason.
Mel, I kept you a few extra minutes. Appreciate you hopping on and doing this. And hopefully it's not the one and only. Hopefully we can have you back on here at some point. But appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And I love Canada. And I have a lot of friends there that are fighting the good fight like you are. We are all in this together if you believe in freedom, sovereignty, individual, liberty, all this stuff that God gave us, they want to take away because they just don't want, people to determine their own destiny. And I think God's going to step in because I still have faith in the world that I grew up in, and I believe that it's not over. So thank you so much for having me. And I'll to everyone out there that's celebrating, happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, and before I let you, where can people find you? And you do have a new book coming out. We should say something about that,
okay.
Mel. Where can people find you? And if they want to buy a book, where do they go?
Okay, I am. My main hub is Rumble. So it's the Mel K Show on Rumble, and I am on X at Mel K Show. I am on Instagram at the Mel K Show, and anywhere you get audio podcasts. My book, Americans Anonymous, Restoring Power to the People, One Citizen at a Time, is a recovery book, 12-step program for the American citizens and others who feel kind of lost in their own nation and aren't sure what really happened. And my next book is coming out, and it's called Infiltration Instead of Invasion, America Betrayed, 1944 to 1954, that shines light on a lot of what I talked about today.
When does it release?
Hopefully soon. I'm done the draft, and now we'll see how fast we can get it out there. I will let you know.
Well, I tell you what, when it releases, we should have you back on. I'd love to, showcase it for you and have you talk a little bit about it. Either way, Mel, thanks for hopping on today.
Thank you. And come visit us too. We'd love to hear what's going on there. And I think people would be interested in America. We don't get any
we
real
can tell you about the bizarre stuff going on in Canada.
Great,
Full
because
stop.
it's crazy. Anyway, God bless you, and God bless Canada and America. It's up to us to bring back freedom and liberty. I think that's the most